this semester at college, I have to teach a film class, which is really difficult because all the class sessions are an hour and 15 minutes, and all the movies are an hour and a half.
Mhm.
So I just play the first 15 minutes real quick and then just watch the end of it. All right. Okay. Christian art. Last time I left off with this, Constantine had just moved the capital of Western civilization to Constantinople. And and made Christianity the official religion. Right? Anybody remember that? So I showed you all the stuff on how to get up to that point. This time we're going to take the official religion from Constantinople to Western Europe, all the way through, pretty well through Gothic, which was a lot of time. Western Europe, the economics during this time frame were up and down. This is also the famous period called the Dark Ages, from about 550 to roughly 900. There's a good reason for that. They have electricity and couldn't turn the lights. Yeah, the Dark Ages. So there was a little art going on during that time. And this time I'm going to do Hibernal Saxon. Anybody know what that is?
Say that again.
Hibernal Saxon. That's the art that came from Scandinavia to England and Scotland and Ireland
Okay.
during about 550, 600 AD.
Mhm.
Very decorative. Okay, Los. How do I make you do this? I mean, it's cool. Okay, all right. When Constantine went to Istanbul, one of the prominent structures that were built then was this one. This is Hagia Sophia. Big church. Anybody ever been to Constantinople, Istanbul? The only place that ever really scared me when I was in East. Great. Thought they were going to shoot me there anytime.
Mhm.
Amazing, large scale structure. Unlike the Romans, this one was not made with concrete. This one was made out of brick and stone. Big structure. And these things were added later on by the Islamics.
Yeah, okay.
So it is now, and has been since about 600, since about 700, a Islamic church. Big one, has a dome on top. Much like the Romans were the ones that essentially invented how to put domes on things. Next one. Should be an inside. This is what it looks like on the inside. This is important for me to read real quickly to you. It goes up and up and up. The dome at the top has a circle of windows around it. Purposefully, this is very important for me when we get to the Gothic period, because when the lights, never been in this thing, you can pay to go for a tour in this, and then they come in and mop the floor after you because you're influenced. You can go barefoot, maybe that would be better. Nonetheless, so anyway, the light around this right here at a certain time of day causes the top of the structure to kind of hover a little bit. And it's very kind of semi-mystical. This one play later as we proceed. All right, during this period, called the Byzantine, these were the head people. This is the king, this is the queen. This lady right here, one of the most powerful women in Western art history, or Western history to be sure. Ranked right up there with the Egyptian pharaoh Adair el-Bahar, and the famous one later on in Egypt. Everybody knows her name.
Nefertiti?
Nefertiti, yes. So powerful women. It's about time Western civilization got smart and put a woman in charge. Right. So this isn't a painting. This is a mosaic. So mosaic. Painting during the Roman period was highly questionable. They didn't do a lot of the Greeks had almost none. They painted only on pots. So the resumption of two-dimensional visual art in the Byzantine period was almost always mosaics. Anybody been to a church that has mosaics all over it? They glow. They're really interesting, extraordinarily labor intensive, very expensive to do. That's why there weren't that many of them. They were just in churches. All the heads are at the same level right here. All the bodies are all the same. The idea of visual construction was still being learned, practiced. The Romans didn't teach them that. The Greeks didn't know how to do that. The last people that did that fairly well, believe it or not, were the Egyptians. Next. Oh, all right, here's a couple of things from that period as well. They also did wood carving. And there's a guy with a staff up here and an orb in his hand, and no halo. This is the orb, the first ever of the most painted subject matter in Western civilization, probably still is. This is this lady right here with a halo, and this little kid right here who looks like he's 14 years old. They didn't know how to do babies well. They really struggled with that. And then, of course, the Holy Family, very flat, very diagrammatic, not very functional in terms of spatial effects. This one over here, the sculpture, is pretty good. Anybody recognize who this might be?
Gabriel.
He had a trumpet in his hand.
Oh,
It's Matthew. Next.
Matthew.
So they were representing again religious figures. Here she is again. This is prototypical Byzantine, big, triangular, solid structure. Here's the little baby again. How old did you say she is now? Hard to say. Halo, no background whatsoever. The idea of space not yet incorporated into two-dimensional art. Okay. Here's what insides of one of these things looks like. This is a Byzantine cathedral. This is actually in what's the city that the boats on?
Venice.
Oh, Venice. This is actually St. Mark's of Venice. Have you ever been to Venice? Did you wear a big hat because of the pigeons? How can you tell? Roman arch. Everything in here was based upon Roman precedent for how to construct things, big things. The Romans are still very, but the decoration in here is all Christian. Next. All right, I like this, very interesting. I just said they didn't do much painting. We skip from Byzantine to about 700. And there's a little painting that always catches the eye. In terms of how it's constructed, this is still questionable. But look what's going on here. There's content to this. This is Christian content. Who would this be? Who plays music? Who sits behind her? Who's that? Hey, you get a really bad sunburn. Come on, who's this? The devil. And who was being peeked at in the distance? Remember my first lecture about the association between humans and animals, that we always had that kind of affectation still here. Except this one looks like a monkey, doesn't it? Hard to tell. This is an interesting one. Next one. I'm gonna go fast. All right, now I mentioned that there are different traditions at hand here. The Western Civ, Constantinople, and that part of the civilization moves westward. But there was another one already in place in Germany and Scandinavia, where the Vikings hung out. And they started floating their boats south and all the way into the Bosporus. As early as 500 BC, AD, right? After Christ. And they were very good. They didn't make large architectural forms, they did craft work. And here's this is a buckle that goes on one of their little pouches that they have. And they're the ones that did enamel in these things. There's an A. Look at the content of these things. Decorative forms over here, decorative forms, little animal faces in place. Very big on minute. This is part of an early tradition that we picked up on later. Yes.
Mhm.
Vikings, animals, very well attached to that idea. Somebody had to be at the front of the boat to scare away the evil spirits or the enemy. In this case, probably the evil spirits. This is pretty formidable. However, many of these things survived, even if they got underwater for 1,500 years. They pull them up and they're still intact. They must have oiled them pretty well. Okay, next one. All right. Yeah. This is purposeful. When the Vikings and other early invaders in England, etc., settled for a long time, they adopted Christianity. And they had little churches, a few occasional schools, but they didn't have the Bibles. And hardly anybody did, but they would decorate the outsides of the Bibles and just focused.
Could be more.
This one's a big rebus, big first letter. It's called the Cairo page. And this is a hibernal section of decoration. I got a close-up of it right here, just so you can see how it's intertwined. Very, very pictorial. Early days of, I want to say, Celtic influence in art. And this is definite Celtic influence in art. These are beautiful. Next time you get to Glasgow or get to Dublin, you go to their museum, this is the kind of stuff you can see they have in there. Then you go right from there to the sea Irish whiskey and Scotland. Very interesting, very decorative. And a lot of these forms have references to little animals in them. It's important. Next one. Now, at the same time, anybody recognize that? That one sitting downstairs came from Scotland. One of the early Christian crosses that they had. This one's in, of course, in a cemetery. They don't get last before they were buried. The circle on it, which is always questionable. Nobody's really quite translated that yet. Does that mean the eternal circle that goes around like eternity? Or is it just decoration? No answer yet, but very common. This is one of the crosses that Christianity adopted early on in England and Scotland and Ireland. This is called a rune stone. If you don't want to carve something, you carve on it. They did that, and that's in Celtic. Can't read that. Decorative stuff, much like the other things. These were all over England and Scotland as well. It's kind of sitting in the yard. Naturally, they're going to last for a long time because they're not affected by the rain. Runestones, this one didn't get moved. They just built the building around. Early hibernal Saxon art, your heritage more so than what came from Constantinople. Next. Okay. It's also in the 7th century AD, beginnings of the Holy Roman Empire. Anybody ever heard of
Yeah, man. The Rome.
who's the guy that did that?
Charlemagne.
Charlemagne. You're a historian in class. That's a good thing. Charlemagne restructures this kind of essence of how culture functions, who's in charge, how they make money, and stabilized it. Also had a small army and kept the people from the east at bay, and civilization takes off again. This is his palace in Aachen in Germany. There you are, Gute Deutsche. Roman arches, the Holy Roman Empire starts again. These are paintings, not mosaics. This is a church. It's also his office. And you can see in this the extent the painting hasn't taken hold. Still working on it, still a work in progress, but they're getting there. These are, of course, things from the Bible. All right, This is interesting. I did this one on purpose. This is much like the Cairo page I showed you, Hibernal Saxon, very decorative. A cross in this has all kinds of. I wish I could get this in focus. There, it's focused when I took the
I
picture.
don't know. Well, it probably could be. I don't know that machine.
Anyway, this one is full of all kinds of stuff. The Hibernal Saxon always included organic. Better? Yeah, thanks. Always included organic things in here, plants, animals, etc. At the same time, this was being done. This was being done. Guess who's on the scene now? Islam. And Islam does their stuff like this, always totally abstract. No human references, no animal references. It'd be good at just writing math on there. It's a big, the difference is the sensibility of these two cultures at work. One of them's organic and about humans. This one's not. Pretty good at doing letters. They did a lot of those, and all of their churches, temples that they made were all abstract forms as well. I like this better. Next. All right, this is an important thing that starts taking place around 800. It's called monasteries. Where did the people in Western Europe at that time frame go to school? Where did they learn? Who taught them? They went to the monasteries. They went to the churches. The priests did all the education. They had these little cities. And you can see in this, there's a church right here, this way and this way. Remember one of the last things I said last time was the Romans gave us the basic form of the church, the basilica form church. Here it is. Here's it will continue to be. If you go down the street to St. Columba, there it is again. If you go to the south side of town to the brick Catholic church, whose name you can never remember.
Sacred Heart.
It is an absolutely perfect basilica form church. Hasn't changed. 1,500 years. So there's a little city here, and they do everything here. Most important is they had a scriptorium for the priestly code, copy Bibles.
Priests, not monks.
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 Yeah.
Good.
Did I say priests? Big difference somehow? Anyway, they go and copy Bibles, which is where the local priests who would go out into the countryside would take them to show people. That's how they got to see Christianity, pretty much. And also in the church itself, which would have paintings and sculptures and references to the Bible as well. They also had a place in here. Next. All right, a couple of the things that emanated from us. Who's the biblical figure that always has either a book or paper in front of them? Matthew. Here it is. Look at his human form in there. It's difficult. Going 5,000 different directions. There's no sense of anatomy in this. They kind of got an expression on his face, and a little background appears. They're starting to think about how to make things that you can see and understand. At the same time that was done, here's a little more of the Bibles that came from those little monasteries. Hibernal Saxon as well. And this one is very well ordered and decorated. Notice some of this stuff. Okay, next. Basilica-form church, I should put that in. This is a Bible cover. It's on a hard piece of vellum, which is animal skin, and decorated all over. People, animals, same stuff, animals, and of course, crucifix. They like to.
I got a question. They were showing these Bibles, people couldn't read. Did it just impress them or what?
They're always in Latin as well.
Yeah, but
No,
was it just
the-
impress the people?
The priest could teach them out of it. Here's what happened in Matthew. Here's what happened in Genesis. That kind of stuff. These things are extraordinarily decorative. Highborough Saxon is more about decoration and structure. I'll show you the architecture from them. Only their Bible covers, basically. And here's where they start doing a little painting. I'm going to copy this right off the internet. It was clear. Distinct. Like, what's going on here? Can you see this well enough? Sure. Here's somebody doing feet.
Washing feet.
Washing their feet, right. A reference early on, guy with a halo. Kind of terrible. And he's doing feet washing. And often in the distance, which is a strange way to portray architecture, in the distance, this little bitty structure of the church itself. So still working on the idea of what you see is not necessarily what you get. Because you see something and we portray it and it's not exactly terrific. All right, that's an important one. I'm gonna digress just for a minute. In France, about 1000 AD, 1100 or so, in that time frame, there's a thing called the Crusades. And those guys weren't very good at it. They need to have some tanks to take them. It didn't work out too well. Anyway, so when they did the Crusades, they did pilgrimages. Familiar term. They would go from France and walk all the way to Santiago de Compostela on the west coast of Spain, right by the other little country there. And on the way to the pilgrimages, there were churches that they made. And this was when Romanesque churches appeared. Very much heavy, with light concrete, not very spatially intact, but big. You could have people in them. Here's an example, once again, Basilica Front Church. What happens is these guys were very clever. They walk in the front door, you walk down the side aisle, walk all the way around, like this. And every place that you went was a little indentation in the wall, and you can make a donation. Clever. How do you get money? Well, you have the pilgrimage and people come in and give it to you. And that's what they would do it. These things. This is what it looked like. And substantially changed in the 18th, 17th century. But the churches are still large, still have what these are called Westworks, which was something that the Romans gave us. Roman-esque, like the Roman architecture. Still very much like the Roman architecture. Pilgrimages were interesting. You get a chance to go to the south of France, right at the bottom corner. Go to any of those churches. It's almost like you can't come in and give us money. But they're very interesting churches. Okay, long way to go. Okay, where are we now?
Looks a lot like pizza.
Come on, everybody knows where this is.
Oh,
Can you get those pictures?
pizza.
Where?
Pizza?
Leaning Tower.
Right.
Italians were never, since the Roman times, they were never really good engineers. You build a building that slants a little bit, they've stabilized that in the book. So this gives you a triumvirate. Here's the main church itself. Basilica Front Church. Roman structure, dome. The Romans essentially invented domes. They disappeared for all practical purposes after Constantinople. Didn't reappear again until the Renaissance. A long time. And this is the baptistry. They had a room inside, and there was no flowing water. So they would go larger kind of construction of the Christian presence in the churches and the size and the effects that they had. Interesting, very decorative, Roman stuff and that's it. In Pisa. Anybody been there? Did you have fun? This one? Still standing. I can imagine someday we're going to see big cable. They have gone in there and dug up a bunch of the base and poured concrete in there and stabilized it. They can go any further. Excellent. Okay. It's almost not visible. All right, Romanesque churches transitioning from the Romanesque to the early Gothic. This is an important period as well. You can always tell Gothic from the Roman arch that becomes pointed slightly at the top. That didn't happen until about 1100 or so. We started. There's a reason for that. The reason I showed you in the Constantinople with the dome at the top. There are a lot of ideologues that helped develop Gothic during this time frame. Talharshi, Ishmael was one of them. And the whole idea with it was to walk into a Christian cathedral. They don't want you to think about where you are. They want you to feel. They want you to look up, see this enormous presence in front of you. Very impressive, very emotionally constructed, very effective. A couple of years ago, I went to Paris again. And went to one of the big cathedrals in Chartres. Same effect. Doesn't matter where you are, you walk into almost and you go, like this. Instead of you walk into an Italian Renaissance church and you go, squares, math, very logical. The entryway to one of these things always have the doorway temperament. There's always some kind of sculpture that always makes a reference to some biblical that as well. You can't see this one. Usually there's the Christ, there's all kinds of that, right? Luke and John, all his friends are in there as well. So sculpture reappears. Painting doesn't reappear, architecture reappears, and sculpture reappears. They were very good at it. The arches of God right here, and this was slightly pointed as well, foreboding that the Gothic period to come next. All right, here's some Gothics. Here's some Romanesque stuff. I couldn't resist this. They were really good. They didn't have Bibles everywhere. And one of the functions of the Christian church from the very beginning almost is this is where you went right to learn about Christianity. You went to the church and you walked in and there would be something from the Old Testament, something from the New Testament, all sculptures and paintings and these things. And mom and dad would take the kids and say, look, this is from the Bible. Here's what this meant. Here's walk around the church. So it was their job to make sure you got the whole story. This is more of the story. I wonder why this one was nicely colored. This one wasn't. It came from exactly the same place. Okay, they're not doing sculpture extremely well. Attenuated long figures, weird bodies on them, but they're doing emotion well. And the Romanesque in this period was very good at portraying how we felt and what was important. What's going on here? There's a person with a halo and wings. Could be an eagle. And what are they doing here? Do you maybe remember the last Egyptian one I showed you, where the person was being walked in, and then they had a scale, and they were measuring whether or not they literally measured up, so they could go to eternity. Same deal. There's a basket right there, and they're weighing souls. If you pass, you go up. If you don't, down. The heavens reach down, grab you by the neck, toss you into hell. How very interesting. Is that emotional or what? Holy cow. Now, who was it that mentioned Gabriel? There he is, right there. Big one. He's blowing people to come to church so they can be judged. And always a lot of feeling in Romanesque sculpture. All this exists on the side of the church. This one they didn't talk. So the Greeks would just turn over their graves when they saw the human form portrayed this way. It won't be another 200 years before we get back to making us look like us. And that would portray how we feel. Look at this guy's face. A demon from the depths of hell. Next one. Sometimes Romanesque was all about feeling. Sometimes I see stuff here that makes me want to cry. This one's not clear enough. This is Mary, and this is Jesus. Here's the donkey. And here they are on the visions. A little sculpture, really immense feeling in there. And this one is just incredible. A little hard to see what's going on here. Come on, up to this. There's 3 guys with crowns on, and they're covered up, and there's an angel, and there's a star in the sky. You got it, exactly. Now, who cares about anatomy? Who cares about space and form and composition? Look how this makes you feel. Oh my gosh. There's an angel telling, all right, you guys, this way, get moving. And we did. And they captured that in stone in the Roman. This is Christian art, in my opinion, in one of its purest forms. Next one. All right, who's this? Gee, how could you tell? Where's that apple? Oh, here it is, right there. And there's no snake. The snake you don't see in this picture.
It's over there.
That's down below, to the right, a little bit.
No, to the right.
Yeah.
Isn't that a snake? No, over more to the right.
Right here?
Keep going. Yeah, that
Or
is that part of the branch?
Part of the branch, actually. Is that actually down here, you can't see it. Now, this is Eve. She's really tricky. Back in those days, they used pomade on their hair because she's laying down and the hair still should be going this way. Who cared? That wasn't the whole intent. What was the intent of her? This is about a period of doubt and questioning about the insecurity of the human condition. And who do we get to lead us out? This lady. Look how they horizontal figure, very feminine. Another story from the Bible. Take the kids in. Look, here's Adam and Eve. And what's that? Well, that's when we first began. God made the earth and made these people. And they did all these things. So cathedrals and the churches did the teaching themselves by the art that they had anyway. No Bibles laying around here. The priest is too busy. Where Holland? Shouldn't be that big a problem. The Egyptians did pyramids. Okay, next one. I don't know how that's like. Basilica Farm Church, ambulatory, walk around, leave money. Next one. All right, not all of the art that was done during the Romanesque was religious art. Some of it was secular. Very small amount was secular. Not hard to figure out why. The economy had just started to be able to support other things. They could always pony up money for the church, but they didn't just go out and buy stuff. Not a whole lot of secular art. This one's actually tapestry. It's called Bayeux Tapestry. It's in New York. The cloisters on the far side of town. Take the subway till it gets to the end, get off, go see them. It's a real long sucker. Goes all the way around the room, so it's taking them forever to knit all that together. I picked this one out of there for a very important reason. Look closely at this. What's happening in this? Aha! It is coming. They documented it. So we know exactly when they did this, and we knew exactly when Halley's Comet appeared in the sky. So they were mindful of physical events in the world around them. They're also busy doing other stuff. Look, this guy's, look, there's a comet up there. And these guys are over here, the king, and this guy is trying to schmooze him for favors. Interesting, secular art about physical events in the world, like comets. I highly recommend it. It's in New York. It's way better than going to Bronx. Next one. All right, this is a cathedral, a Romanesque cathedral at Leon. Did I mention that we took the animals with us? Yeah. Cathedrals took a long time to make. Notre Dame, for example, took about 80 years. And there would be generations of the same family that contributed to building these cathedrals. Chartres took longer, way bigger. Most of the smaller ones only took 50 or 60 years. So there were contributions from the people that lived in towns, that worked, raised crops, traded all the usual stuff. This is a little bit later. You can tell it's during the Gothic period. It's an important pointed arch up here as well. But in paid homage to the animals that sustained them while they were doing this. Not let go of the animals yet. Just count how these animals were this. Cleans up that. It's never kidding. There's obviously a cow. I'm sure what that is. Another cow, a couple of cows. Anyway, they did them, they schlepped the stone up there and carved them in place. Sure to dig it to them. And at the top up here, and this is interesting as well. I was going to mention this. During the Gothic period, they had gargoyles in the cathedrals. Why? What are the gargoyles for? Always at the one. Why do the Christian churches have gargoyles? Gargoyles would scare away the evil spirits. What the heck is Christ doing there for? He scares away the evil spirits. Not let go of them yet. We've not let go. We're still. Remember the one I showed you of the lady, the snake lady, two snakes in her hands and a bird on her head, the Earth Mother Goddess, still hovering in the back of our minds. This is 1300. The animals are there too. It's hard for us to let go. Right. Next one. Okay. I should have taken the front of this because that shows the gargoyles. This is classic cathedral building. Not hard to tell what this one is. It's the same. And this is before it burned. And that's seen it since then. And all the gargoyles are on the other side. No animals. This is what we call structural rationalism in architectural history. This force pushes this way, that force pushes that way, and it stands up. As opposed to classicism, where you have a post and a lintel, everything's vertical. So the ideology that allows this really high structure to take place is definitely, there's the Greeks never built two-story buildings. Well, a couple, very few. We, of course, could do that. Flying buttresses, upper stories. You know what they put on these things to keep them dry? Lead. All the ceilings are lead, sheets of lead. Roll them out, put them in place, weld them down. You know, like touching that architecture school.
That's what it was, man.
Anyway, good. You know, what's more impervious than lead? You don't have to do anything to it, just leave it. You can't eat it, wear it, or make love to it, and it doesn't smoke. So it's going to be there forever. Interesting, big cathedral, Notre Dame. There were 9 Notre Dame churches in France, this one, all over the place. Everybody's going to have Our Mother church here. And of course, this appears. I'll show you some of these later. And the spire, top. Remember in Constantinople, round dome, lights around the bottom. The idea of looking up. Gotta go up. Why? Who's up there? What do you think? Doing that again. Next. I just had to make that point. This is Rome. This is the Pantheon. All of their gods at once. And they still do that. They open this to the outside so you can look up. And here it is again, and it comes to another one. And the light shines on it, levitates it, and look up. The verticality in the Gothic period was all important. When you walked into one of those churches, they wanted you to sense that God was right there in front of you. Look up and smooth. Thanks. All right, here's a couple of Gothic cathedrals with the tops on them. And they're very decorative. Only the English do this. It's kind of fan walls. Here's a good example of what I was just talking about. They go up way high. You have an arcade, a triforium, and clerestory. Clerestories are always in glass. And above them, a brick ceiling. And when the light shines correctly, dematerializes that space. Yes. Next. Now, the Gothic artists rarely painted, much like the Greek guys. They rarely painted. So what did they paint with? Glass. The Gothic period, the vast majority of the two-dimensional art is in glass. Look at this stuff. Now, hard to tell what this is right here. These guys right here. Here's Christ the figure. There's a warrior. They also did big windows. Showed you on the other side of Notre Dame, the big rose window. That's what it looks like from the other side. They're particularly dramatic during the day. When the light shines through them, they just glow. Some of that glass is that thick, really heavy, dark colored stuff stays in place. And when the light's on it, when the direct sunlight's on it, it just shimmers. It's really, really emotionally ingratiating. You can't help but feel why it's there, what it's for. You can't. So stained glass appears in the Gothic period. Who invented the use of glass in architecture? The Romans. They did. In fact, they had an industry. They exported it. A lot of the early Roman buildings, about 200 AD, 300 AD, had glass windows at the top, clear glass. Never did stained glass as well. And the other ones that started coming up with glass utensils, and pitchers and plates and stuff like that, can be conductive as they export. But it wasn't a forgotten craft. The Gothic artists learned how to do this stuff. It takes forever to do one of these things. Just incredibly tedious, labor intensive, which means expensive. All right. Next. After the Gothic period stopped making big cathedrals and stained glass, they started painting again. A lot cheaper to do that. This is the early one. Terrible. Better equipment. This one is obviously what's going on here. Religious painting. Who's dead and what are they doing? It's called lamentation. After Christ taken off the cross and laid that flag. And they would come, his faithful followers, and grieve. Lament his death. Lamentation. This one's by one of the more famous Italian artists named Giotto, who took place in about 1330 or so. Still not quite to the Renaissance. Giotto gives us something we never saw before in anybody's painting anywhere. A sense of dimensionality. There's a background and then a foreground. Oh my gosh, space appears. All of the figures occupy their own space as well, and all of them are well formed. Now, Giotto, whose name ends in an O or an I, must be and he's a good little Italian boy. So he's surrounded by classicists. They all grew up with it. The Forum was there, all the classical Roman buildings were there, and the Greeks were right close by. So he knew what composition was about. And he gives us all these mythological figures that could fly. Gotta have a few of those there as well. Who's this? Mom. And all the other cast of characters. One of the things that they'd like to do is give you early Renaissance stuff, maybe next time. But in the Renaissance, there was a guy that painted another little Italian boy, maybe in the middle, named Da Vinci. And he did something in painting nobody had ever done before. He would surround his figures, his subject matter, usually Mary, with figures from the distant past. Give you all history at once, especially the one where Mary's sitting there with the baby, which is the most portrayed painting in Western civilization. Joppa doesn't quite do that. It gives you a really substantial cast of characters. And this is important because it resumes a tradition left by the Romans about 100 AD. Victor Wand. Good at it as well. Really, really good. Is he gonna wash his feet or no? So would this be a priest? This be? Still do your homework. Okay, you know which. Yeah, here's all right. All right, one more I think. I love this one. This is in the late 14th century, 1360 or so. The Italian boy. Now, what's going on? What's the content of this? Would you come sit down? You got chairs.
Thank you.
No, I'm almost done. Just this is obvious. What's going on? Anytime you see a human with wings flopping in front of a woman, what's going on? The Annunciation. He's telling you, guess what, lady? You're in for a big surprise. Stick around for about 9 months and you'll see. So it's guild work in here, gold leaf, almost background in this. You learn from Giotto. There's a spatial aspect in the foreground as well. Pushes people in here, all the people are closer to anatomically correct than anybody has been in the history of art since the Greeks. Big step. When they get to Renaissance, they're perfect again. Right? So what happens? Here's this thing flutters in. You can tell it is because wind's still whipped up from his wings in the background. Got two pieces on the side, and there's Mary. She's going, who the heck are you? Why are you here? Do I want to believe this? Look at the doubtful look on her face. Lilies and an olive branch. Peace and love. Peace and love. It's going to crown the hut. Listen, this artist did something almost, in fact, no one before this has ever done. You can't see it well, but streaming out of his mouth in Latin is a message. Holy Mary, Mother of God, peace be with you. Anybody here go to a Catholic mass recently? Happens every time. Same thing. So he's telling her, the angel is telling her this. Telling her at the same time she's going to be the mother of Jesus. That would be a little shock for most of them, wouldn't it? Holy cow! And then with the guy, what can I say? Beautifully portrayed, angel, perfect. So, not just wings. How the manuscripts and works. And here she is with this kind of doleful look on her face. So this one, this in the late 1400s, 1360 or so. Gives us what we always had differences, what most, any one of the Gothic cathedrals or churches would have some kind of rendition of the Annunciation. All of the Bibles that are being made and the reliquaries by the priests all contain that information as well. It's not that readily available. In fact, it doesn't become available till about 1420 or so. Anybody heard of a guy named Johann Gutenberg? So much for art. Everybody had a Bible after that. And this kind of activity in the cathedrals had less significance. Yeah, you didn't have to go to the cathedral to study Christianity. All right, next section goes from him to the present. Go through the Renaissance. The Renaissance has tremendous amount of extraordinary Christian art. And it stays with us for a long time. Goes to the Baroque, which was about, this is interesting, the Renaissance is about the rebirth of classicism. Classicism is an intellectual activity. And you think about everything. You should see some of the Italian churches during the Renaissance. They're like mathematical exercises. They don't make you go when you walk in. And Catholicism lost a lot of ground until about mid 1550 or so. Lost a lot of ground, and they said, how can we make this come back? They made it dramatic. Introduced drama into it. That's where we get Baroque. That's where we'll go next time. Please come back.
Are you doing it next week?
Whatever the book tells me to. All right, thank you for coming. I always like to have an audience.